Facebook.
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 Facebook. Facebook. Facebook.
Facebook. Facebook.
Facebook.
Facebook.
Facebook.
Facebook.
Facebook.
Facebook.
This story about Cambridge Analytica and Facebook is history in the making. It's the first time that we're seeing how dangerous this hyper-connected, oversharing, algorithmically driven world that we live in really is. And this could have long-lasting impact as to what social media looks like in the future and how it behaves. And surprisingly, we're still seeing people that are asking, so what? Just in case you're one of like 8 people on the entire planet that aren't aware of this story, Facebook is in a boatload of hot water right now because a company called Cambridge Analytica mined a whole bunch of profile data from Facebook using a personality quiz. And that sounds really straightforward, but part of the problem is it's really, really not. The headlines in the news all say that Facebook suffered a breach or they had a data leak. And that's not what happened here. Facebook simply had almost no controls over who could access what data and what data they could even collect. The decision for what data to collect is left entirely up to the application developers who don't work for Facebook. And that's basically like leaving an almost infinite pile of cookies unsupervised in a room and then telling Scott that he's only allowed to have one. In his article on The Atlantic, contributing editor Ian Bogost talks about his early career as a Facebook app developer and how, even without trying, his app gathered more data than he wanted simply because requesting even the bare minimum data necessary for his app returned way more information than he needed. What Cambridge Analytica did on Facebook is like you going to your local bank and requesting your transaction history, and instead you got the transactions of all of your closest family members and your friends and your coworkers. One dude that you sort of know that you met the one time and he just added you on Facebook, so kind of out of guilt, you just added him back. Former high school prom date and that you're still friends with even though you don't really ever talk to your grandmother, and your grandmother's 6 retired friends that think you're just the cutest ever. Your in-laws and their in-laws, your stepsister's cousin who you've literally never met. In other words, everybody in your contact list. But it's just transaction data. I'm not doing anything illegal. I have nothing to hide. Even if you don't have anything to hide, what are the odds that you could draw some potentially uncomfortable conclusions based solely on somebody's transaction history? If they're at the golf store a lot, they're probably a golfer. Are they buying $150 a month worth of pumpkin spice lattes? Chances are they're a basic white girl. Netflix subscription? You probably live someplace that's fairly populated with access to broadband. Now, what about a Planned Parenthood transaction? Making assumptions based on this type of data to better understand a user's interests or values is called a psychographic profile. And you can clearly infer a lot of information just from a bank statement, but is that even accurate or complete? And is that the type of impression that you want to leave with somebody else? That's what everyone is freaking out about with this story. Facebook is not your private journal. It's not a quiet place for you to connect with your friends and your family. Facebook gathers data, deeply personal data, about what you do, say, see, and like, and then they give other companies access to that data so that they can make assumptions about you to try and influence you. Amazon knows your shopping history and Google knows your search results, but Facebook knows you. Facebook's response to this has been to place responsibility for profile security back on you, the user. So any application that wants access to your profile has to specifically ask you for it, which works about as well as saying read the terms of service.
But when you look at terms of service, this is what you get. Do you think the average consumer understands what they're signing up for?
I don't think that the average person likely reads that whole document.
Remember that Facebook game that asked you for permission to read your profile or something and you didn't really care or take the time to read it, so you just clicked OK? That was you sending them your profile data. And once you've done that, the damage is done. It's permanent. That data is no longer under control by Facebook. You have digitally sent them a copy of everything that they asked for, and it exists outside of Facebook until that company decides to delete it. Basically forever. Now, if we reassemble all the pieces of what we've just talked about, you get the complete story of what happened. Cambridge Analytica partnered with a professor from Cambridge University, they created a personality quiz app which purposefully gathered too much data about anyone who took the quiz and all of their contacts, all in an effort to target them with political ads to influence election results. It's unprecedented in its scope. It's terrifying. It's probably the future. So Facebook was lazy and sloppy and reckless with how much personal data it handed over to just about anybody who would ask for it, regardless of their credentials or regardless of whether or not they even really needed that data. And the way that Cambridge Analytica asked for that data makes them a bunch of slimy, skeezy, low-life mother people. Bad people. And Facebook has knowingly operated this way for years, which is how we get to the point where CEO Mark Zuckerberg had to testify in a Senate hearing, which led to this absolutely incredible exchange.
Mr. Zuckerberg, would you be comfortable sharing with us the name of the hotel you stayed in last night?
No.
We can all agree that personal privacy is massively important, and even if you have nothing to hide, we still need to be concerned about how our data is being used. This is the social media reckoning. These companies have operated unchecked for nearly a decade, and they need to be held accountable for what data they have access to and how they protect it. And until these companies decide that they're going to take user data privacy seriously and protect our information, which allows them to exist in the first place,